hearing there is the Chilean activist and musician Victor Jara, and that song is called Manifesto, taken from the album of the same name. And Jara was tortured and murdered by the Pinochet regime in 1973. His work, his activism and his music is the subject of James Dean Bradfield's brand new solo record, only his second ever solo record and his first since 2006. And I'm delighted to say that the Manics frontman joins us now live on Times Radio. Good evening and welcome to the programme.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm really well, how are you? How you been holding up in lockdown?
Well, kind of. I got two young kids, so I was kind of doing the headmaster job while my wife was doing the teaching job, kind of thing. I grew a beard like many other people, and I expanded my repertoire of dishes up to about 20, kind of thing, in terms of cooking. So it went okay.
How old are your kids?
4 and 8. So kind of, yeah, it was they became dependent on us while becoming slightly weary of us.
Yeah, that's a familiar story.
But it's all been good. You know, I've listened to a lot more music, I've read a lot more, and thankfully I had this record finished before it all happened. So it was kind of nice being like atomized and fused together like this in a way as a family. It was good in some ways.
So explain why you chose the work of Victor Jara to focus your second solo record on. How did that enter your sphere of influence?
It came about just by a mixture of like serendipity and kind of psychogeographic empathy, I think I'd call it, really. I've always been aware of Victor Jara because of so many other acts have cited him since the 80s. You know, I first heard about Victor Jara in a Clash song called Washington Bullets. Then U2 wrote a song about him. Then Working Week did. Simple Minds dedicated an album to him. I remember reading an interview about the film Missing, and Victor Jara was mentioned in that, the Jack Lemmon film. So I've always been aware of him. And kind of round about 3 years ago, I was visiting a friend in the Valleys after seeing my father. And my friend is a playwright and poet called Patrick Jones, who's the brother of Nicky from the Manics. And he was just doing a writing exercise. He was writing about Victor Jara. He was writing poems, prose. He'd even written a one-man play about him. And it was quite strange because Patrick made it clear that he wasn't going to release any of this. He was just doing it as a writing exercise. And of course, me being the person that needs words to write music too, I was slightly mercenary and opportunistic in seeing the opportunity to actually set all these beautiful words to music. And I had such a empathy to the subject anyway, because other musicians have been teaching me about Victor Jara all my life. And it gave me a chance to actually explore his music more as well.
But one of the things I found really heartwarming actually about this whole experience is that the Manics seem to be a family. So even though, when some bands go on a break and you think, aye, do you know what I mean? But when that, you never think that when you go, do you know what I mean? But you never think that when you guys go on a break.
I do, yeah. Kind of like sometimes you take a break because you can't stand the sight of each other anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's never the case with us.
No.
For a start, we take a break because we have a small suspicion that the audience needs a break from us. You know, MSPpedia is very strange. You know, we've recorded 13 albums. I've been writing songs with Nick and Sean since 1985. We've been together for so long, and we've known each other since we were born. So sometimes we just get the suspicion that the audience just go, do you know what? Can you go away for 3 years? Not make us buy your tickets, not make us buy your records and come back. So that's what we did. You know, we do that now and again. It's never because of us. We just think that we need to give the audience a break. But you're right. You know, we took a break, and then what do? I go running into the arms of his brother to get lyrics from... I go running into the arms of Nicky Wire's brother to get words off him. In fairness, we've worked a lot with each other in the past. I've done a lot of music for his plays in the past and stuff. And he was always a bit of an inspirational character to all of us because he went off to America. He was older than us. And when he came back, you know, he started feeding us beat poetry, stuff from Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and stuff from Allen Ginsberg, stuff from Kerouac. You know, you get the picture.
Yeah, he's a modern-day Dylan Thomas, is he?
There's Walt Whitman, stuff like that. So he was always one of those older, cooler kids that kind of just seemed to widen the world for me, really.
We're going to play Under the Mimosa Tree, and the reason why I wanted to play that, firstly because I've fallen in love with this track since I've heard it in the last couple of days, James, but also because I think having heard the original Victor Hara, I think you can see what James is doing with this album. So from Even in Exile, this is Under the Mimosa Tree. Now, as we hear that, James, musically, how different was that for you to perform and arrange compared to what you're more used to performing and arranging with the band?
In fairness to the Manics, they've always we've always put stuff on our B-sides, a thing which is of the past now, obviously, because of the world's disavowalment of the physical format. But kind of in the past, a lot of our B-sides have been a bit more cinematic in scope, have been a bit more soundtrack-esque. So I've had practice at doing that, but to do it to this full effect with a real narrative behind it was a bit of a challenge, because obviously you're talking about somebody's life. You're talking about Victor Hara. You're talking about his ambitions, his dreams, his country, his ideology, his death. There's all those things in there, and you need to be very careful that you don't over-egg it, as people say, or that you don't be too flippant with it. So I think dealing with the narrative of somebody's life that is so beautiful and yet so tragic is the hard thing. You know, you don't want to harm that legacy in any way. So that's the hard bit.
You said earlier that you love putting music to other people's words, but you have written lyrics, haven't you?
Yeah, I've written some words. Sometimes they come, but it's very rare. I'm kind of in a rare club, really. You know, I can think of 3 acts. You get Elton John, that always pretty much sings somebody else's words. Rush, the Manics are all massive fans of. Neil Peart, the drummer, always wrote the lyrics for Rush. Obviously, you've got Pete Townsend writing the lyrics for Roger Daltrey. So you've got all those examples, and I usually sing other people's words, and I've got no problem with that. But now and again, I now and again I write a lyric once in a blue moon. In all fairness, I love my role of working with people like Nick and Richey and now Patrick. You know, I love it when I love that challenge of them giving me amazing words and then having the responsibility of having to try and match that with the music. I love that job.
And you, I'm told, played all of the instruments on this solo record. Did you enjoy the solitude that brought?
Well, drums I didn't play. That's okay. Kind of that's the one frontier that I don't think I'll ever conquer the frontier of learning drums. I think it's like, yeah, I did like the solitude of it. I suppose it's myself and the engineer. It's not true solitude, but I get your drift. You know, learning the double bass was lovely, because not so good for the ego, because it's a bit challenging to learn an instrument which is taller than you. But kind of, you know, it's not hard, boom, boom, because I'm quite diminutive and all that. But it's kind of, you know, I started out, what was my entry point into learning the double bass? It was the bass line to the Love Cats by The Cure, of course.
Oh,
yeah.
I
played that for days solid, and then I explored other avenues, and I was there. My piano playing is kind of akin to some kind of John Huston kind of like scene, you know, where somebody goes through the saloon doors and somebody's playing piano very badly, you know, thing before the gunfight. If I concentrate, I can get some tenderness in my playing. So I really enjoyed it. I mean, I absolutely loved writing to these lyrics, and I love the responsibility of it. And it's brilliant, because now I go back to the Manics and I get to write with the other Jones brother, which is my main job. So, you know, I cannot moan about a thing.
We'll talk about that in a second. But what I'm intrigued by is why this was only your second solo record in, I think, 14 years. And so, but the band have taken other breaks. So how is it that in some intervening years you've gone, you know what, I'll do nothing, but this time you were like, I'm doing a record?
Well, it was around about 3 years ago where Manics said, you know, we are sitting down and we're not going to release a record for a while now, because we suspect the audience needs a break and we need to find a new angle. This endless hall of mirrors is run out of kind of new angles, and we need to find some new ones, or we need just to relax about not finding a new angle. We just need some perspective. So that's why I did this record. I knew there was a stretch of time in front of me, and I'm an institutionalized musician. You know, without having a project, as Premier League football managers like to call everything a project. Sorry, sorry, I shouldn't fall into that trap, should I? Without having an album to do. I panic. I do panic. So I was subconsciously, I was looking for something to do. And this did fall into my lap. It was like that kind of psychogeographic empathy. Wales does have a massive connection to Victor Jara. You know, there's one of the only kind of festivals which is dedicated to Victor Jara outside of the Spanish-speaking world is actually based in Machynlleth in North Wales. Right. Wales does have a really big connection to Victor Jara. Lots of people that left Chile after 73, after the Pinochet coup, went and settled in Swansea because of lots of miners that lived in Chile, etc., and they came to Wales. So, see, when Victor when Pat presented me with all this stuff, just to show me, I just had to do it. So I don't know if I would have done something so formed, so conceptual as this if that hadn't just fallen into my lap.
So Santiago Sunrise was the other track I wanted to highlight off this album, but it's got quite a long intro before the vocal, so it's just going to run underneath us, and I thought you could explain a bit about it and then we'll hear some of your vocal on it.
Okay.
I apologise, I think some sneaky editing went on there, because there's certainly the version I heard earlier this afternoon.
No,
50/40.
Yeah, I mean, with this song, there's a song before it called The Last Song, which is kind of about, it is about the last 2 weeks of Victor Jara's life. But that was meant to be the last song on the record, but then Pat wrote another lyric called Santiago Sunrise, and I think he'd written it in reaction to some of the mass protests that's happened in Chile over the last 2 years or so against the Sebastián Pinera government. I think it's National Renewal, I think his party is. There's been lots of protest against lots of cuts and in kind of Chilean public life, etc. And there's been lots of protests in the street, but the marked things about the protests they've been so big, there've been thousands and thousands, 5,000 to 10,000 to 20,000 people. But the really startling thing is that a lot of people have been singing Victor Jara songs, and they're not even people that are older, like myself, 51 or something. You actually look at this footage, and it's people ranging from 18 to 30, all singing songs that were written in 1969 and 1968 and 71. It's very strange. You don't see mass protest movements singing songs that are so old, but that are of such a new generation. For me, they're achieving the dream. They're actually coagulating. They're actually coalescing, around these old songs. But they're very outward looking. They're young people. They care about Chile, but they're still very outward looking as people. So I think this song, Santiago Sunrise, was written about those events to a certain degree, and it's the idea of people like Violeta Parra, Joan Hara, Inter Illimani, who was another Chilean group, of all these sentinels of what happened, the brutality of what happened in the coup, that they're still watching, along with this new generation of people that are singing very old songs.
So that's the second track we've played you tonight on Times Radio, taken from Even in Exile, which is out now. And you mentioned then that you're back with the Manics next year with new material. I mean, actually, you have got some gigs scheduled at the end of the year. They're going to be free gigs for the NHS, but I mean, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure I can see those going ahead. Can you?
No, at the moment, if you would put a bet on today, perhaps you would bet against it, though that's not me announcing anything in any way.
No, I know.
Yeah, I mean, all promoters now, whenever they announce a gig, you can be rest assured that they have other dates on hold just in case that date is cancelled. So there are other dates set aside for these gigs if they don't happen. And yeah, these gigs are for the NHS. The first night is for anybody that works for the NHS, whether they're a porter, a nurse, a neurosurgeon, somebody that works in the canteen, anybody that works for the NHS from anywhere in Britain, that applied for tickets will be at that concert on the first night. And then the second night was sold on the basis that all the money will go to an NHS trust. So, all I want to make clear about those gigs is that, they sold out, mostly because the first night was free, of course. Everybody loves a free ticket. But what is very important about those gigs is, yes, they're for NHS workers and they go to the NHS trust, the profit from the second night. But there will be no speeches. There will be no tears. There will be no proselytizing about anything at all. It would just be rock and roll, dancing and drunkenness, and that's it.
Good. I think that's pretty much what I got from my first ever Manics gig at the Manics Arena in Manchester in 1997, to be honest with you, James.
Oh, you're aging us all now. Jesus Christ. And actually, was it called the Manics then? Was it called?
It was. I looked it up to double check.
Yeah, it's changed now, isn't it?
I know, yeah. Yeah, Manchester Arena now.
Those youthful salad days, eh?
Exactly. So listen, Nicky's been talking to the NME about the new material. He says you've written one, what he calls really brilliant Manic song called Orwellian. Are you able to describe it to us? And is that going to be the tone of the album?
Well, the one thing I think Nick really didn't want to do was write a lockdown record. We don't want to come out of this singing about lockdown. We just want to, we just didn't want to do that. And there was one sitting, this song was kind of finished before lockdown, and I think it pulls that trick of having a very dystopian lyric, a lyric that you could it's like a cheerful funeral march. It's just like, it's uplifting, but the lyrics are somewhat dystopian. So it is that trick of having the ambition to make you feel melancholic glee like ABBA, but really, it's taking you down a road with Nick Cave dressed as the Reaper.
That's brilliant. That's the best description I've ever heard of any song ever.
I don't know if I'm selling it, I gotta say.
ABBA meets Nick Cave, I'll tell you. Nicky said it's got a bit of if you tolerate this to it. He's called it retrofuturism, and I was trying to work out what retrofuturism was. I couldn't get there.
Me too. No, I think retrofuturism is when it's like a version of the future, but yet somehow still analog. Like, no one of you hear those records that they're trying to ape sounds from the 80s, from Moog synthesizers, but they're not quite there because they haven't got a valve in it. It hasn't got that old digital technology. I think that's what retrofuturism is. Those beautiful old Tangerine Dream records, even early Depeche Mode records, just still have that kind of naive vision of what the future can be, because that version of digital is still analog.
And you also, next year, I'm reading that you're hitting the road with the Killers, is that right?
Yeah, we're supposed to be, again,
who knows? If it happens.
We're supposed to be doing these support gigs with the Killers in Britain. And that's good because there's no pressure when you're the support act, and that'll get hopefully that'll get us back in some kind of form. But it really is just all prevarication at the moment. It's trying to see into the future, and that's when my mind unravels from coming out of lockdown. If I look too far into the future, I realize that you realize that you have no control over all these arbitrary events that can happen. So I like to aim for tomorrow rather than anything beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's really sensible. But, the one thing lockdown has emphasised to us, if we needed it, is just how important the creative arts are to us all. It's the one thing we all turn to, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I listen to a lot of music anyway, but I went pretty crazy listening to music. And that's part of that was realising that I was at the age where self-motivation is quite scarce on the ground. If I'm exercising now, I need music. I need that old I need that old Jane Fonda workout now. I need to get physical. Oh, sorry, that's Olivia Newton-John, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah. You're getting your old spandex videos mixed up.
But I listened to double the amount of music because I was exercising quite a lot, and also I started to realize why I liked a lot of jazz and a lot of prog, because it stretches time. It's such a simple way to view that music, but I never realized that prog music at its best, like Rush or Man, or jazz at its best, Charlie Parker and say, The Bad Plus, that kind of music just stretches time. It makes sense. It makes sense out of time. So I love that, because at midway point during lockdown, the days started to run into each other. Whereas if I'd play certain types of music, I could stretch the days out and I could reform them. So, yeah, that sounds like I'm getting a bit trippy now. I'll stop there.
I love it. Answer me this. What can you put your finger on why you've enjoyed such longevity as a band? Because the bands that stick together and don't end up knocking 7 shades out of each other are few and far between, aren't they?
It's because, Sean is virtually my brother. He's my cousin. He's the drummer. He was the son of Jennifer, that was my mother's sister. My mother passed away, and they were very close, those two. So myself and Sean became close. So we are virtually brothers. And Nick, I remember seeing Nick in Miss Elizabeth's class just when I was about to turn 5. And so I've known him since I was 5 years old. We decided to start writing songs with each other when we were about 15. Very, best friends and stuff. And he tolerated me for the first 10 years of his life. To his credit, he tolerated me, to be honest. But we were just close. And Richey was always a year older, the same age as Sean, and he always seemed so cool. But when I actually got to know him when I was about 15, I realized he had the same insecurities. And he was into Killing Joke, he was into Echo and the Bunnymen, he was into Stranglers, he was into The Fall. He was into all the right things. And, and you knew he was going to be he was going to take a great photo and he was going to give a great quote. You just knew it, So we're all so close. And, you could see if you put 4 of us amongst a crowd, back in the valleys, back in the 80s, we would gravitate towards each other because we were all liking the same kind of indie music. And we just really, we were friends before we became bandmates. That's the big thing. We all knew that we were idiots before we became bandmates. Lots of bands form and they find out after 2 albums that they really don't like each other. We knew that, that we liked each other before we became bandmates. And that's been the key to it. And also, the words, that Nick and Richey wrote together, and since Richey's disappearance, the words that Nick writes are just amazing. They're enough to keep any band going.
James, thank you. I've really, really enjoyed that half hour on the radio with you. It's been an absolute privilege for me, so thank you so much. Even in Exile by James Dean Bradfield is out now. New Manic stuff coming next year, with hopefully the return of some live gigs towards the end of the year or into next year, depending on the COVID situation. Look after yourself, James. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much. That was lovely. Take care. Bye-bye.